one of the analytical questions that I try to give my students so that whenever they're exploring a religious tradition, it's a place to begin to sort of see the sort of the perspective or the worldview of that religion is, I ask them to try to figure out what is the human predicament in the perspective of that religious tradition. So it defines what the problem is, what the human predicament is, and then it defines a solution. So for Judaism, what would you say is the human predicament and its solution?
I don't know if I'm going to give you the right answer here. I'm going to just tell you what came to mind for me in this moment. There is a great Hasidic story teaching, really, that a person should always carry in their pockets 2 phrases, one in each pocket. And in one pocket, you have the phrase, for me, the world was created. And that we learn in Genesis, right? That the world is created, and then Adam, the first human, is put on the earth to tend it and till it, right? To take care of this earth. You are stewards of this earth. It was made for you. Be nice to it. And also you're in charge of it. So like you're in charge of it and be nice to it. Okay. And the other hand, in your other pocket, is the phrase, for you are but dust and ashes, which we also know to be true and also comes from Genesis, right? That we are each created, the first person was made from the dust of the earth. And the teaching there is that we are both incredibly important and we are also not important at all. And the idea is that you hold on to both of those. You hold on to both of those to give yourself whatever you need to balance you out in the moment. When you're feeling pretty low, you can remind yourself that the world was made for you, and that perhaps gives you something to move forward with. And if you're a little bit too far on the side of the spectrum where you really think the world was made for you, right? You can also remember that, like, also you're just a bunch of dirt that got formed into a shape at some point and like breathes. I think that kind of
equilibrium.
Right, equilibrium, but like the like
balance,
divinity and humanity, that humanity is an amalgam of divinity and like
real,
and like humanness. Like we are animals and we are divine together. We're the only things, according to Judaism, that have managed to like God created this being in God's image, and our role is to figure out how to like do the best we can with that knowledge, knowing that we are both created in God's image and also we're humans who like have to sleep and eat and poop like everything else that is an animal, and that someday is going to die. Like we're not immortal. So if we are godly but we're not immortal, what is our role in the world? And that, I think, is when we get that answer of tikkun olam often, especially in the Reform movement, right? Like, what's our role in the world? Our role in the world is to like live this one life that we have fully and with like compassion and justice.
So let me ask a question that I think will help our students here. So what role does being the, quote, chosen people then? How do you respond to that? Because we know that there are some conflicting responses to what does it mean when you say Jews are God's chosen people? And sorry, Kip, I didn't mean to, but I think that's one that our students might want to know the answer to.
I find that the answer that I give doesn't seem to be enough for people. So I'll offer this response and then say that like, I know it's not enough for some people, and I recognize that, and I can't apologize for it, but I do recognize that for some people it's not enough. The way that I understand chosenness is not as better than, but as for a particular task. It's pretty simple, right? To be chosen in the way that saying Black Lives Matter, sorry, I'll go there because this is part of my rabbinate, in the way that saying Black Lives Matter does not mean that all lives don't matter, so too does saying Jews are chosen does not mean that all people are not also chosen, right? That each being in the world, not just Jews, are important and divine, right? The Torah doesn't say God made the first Jewish person in God's image, right? God said, or the Torah says, God made human beings in God's image, which means we all have the divine spark inside of us. And so if that is true, then we are all godly. And if we are all godly, we are all massively and equally important. So to be chosen means to be chosen for a particular task. And what we are taught our particular task is to repair the world. And that's this Kabbalistic concept, this Rabbi Isaac Luria tells a story of how the world was created, in which I'm going to do this in the shortest way possible, which is the way I learned it in second grade, which gave me this great image that I can't get rid of and doesn't live in rabbinic scripture anywhere. So God was everywhere. And because God was everywhere, there was nowhere God wasn't. And what you know is that in order to create something, you have to have space to create it in. So God was like, I will contract myself in order for there to be enough space for something else to be created. And so God, it's called tzimtzum. It's my favorite word in Hebrew, because it's so fun to say tzimtzum, and it's really like tzimtzum. So God tzimtzumed God's self, and in order to do that, God compacted bits and pieces of God's self into these vessels, which I have always imagined since second grade as spaceships. And these spaceships had little bits of God light, which I imagined as light, in them, but as is perhaps not surprising, like God is too powerful to be contained by anything. And so these God-filled vessels exploded, and like bits and pieces of God and shards of vessel ended up all over the earth that God had in the meantime created. And so there's shards of brokenness all over the world, and there's shards of God all over the world. And in each of us is one of those shards of God. And our job is to find all of the shards of vessel and the shards of God and bring them back together. And when we do that, like when we in one of our prayers at the very end of the service, we it's Aleinu L'Shabeach. The end of it is Bayom Hahu, on that day, Adonai Echad Ushmo Echad. God will be one and his name will be one. God will be one and God's name will be one. And when I hear that, when I pray those words, I think about what it would look like if all of the human beings of the world, each of whom holds this tiny, tiny piece of God, were able to actually find a way to come together. And on that day, God will be one and God's name will be one. And that just means that like all of us will have found a way to be one humanity.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful.
Yeah, that's an awesome answer. Thanks.
The spaceship, I'm thinking Starship Enterprise there for you, Kip.
Yeah.